Welcome to chapter 1 of the book of 2 Samuel, going on down now through the life of King David. It begins with the death of Saul and Jonathan. And it came to pass after the dying of Saul on Mount Gilboa with Jonathan and his other sons, and David returned from striking Amalek, which we mentioned in the second to last chapter. I think that when he went after the men that burned Ziklag, the city or the town that all of his people were living in, and took them captive, and then David went out and struck them and sent all of the spoils to people in Israel. And so he has now returned from striking Amalek, and that David stayed in Ziklag 2 days, where he was at there after they struck Amalek and came back. And it came to pass in the 3rd day, and behold, a man came from out of the camp of the people of Saul. So he apparently hasn't heard yet what had happened with the war with the Philistines, that he was supposed to join up with King Achish of Gath, but the other Philistine leaders said, no, we don't want him with us, he'll be a spy and so forth, and sent him back. So this man comes out from the camp of Saul, and his clothes were torn up, and earth was upon his cephalic is the derivative head, his head. And this is what they did. They threw dirt on their head, ground, earth, dirt, and tore their clothes and make themselves look as bad as they felt. And it happened in his entering to David that he fell upon the ground. See, there's ground, Gene 1093, and in Gene 1093, earth was upon his head. You wouldn't say ground was upon his head. You could say dirt, but earth is also used for people that know that that's what it is. And he did obeisance to him. He got down on his face in front of David to show that he was lower than David. David was somebody important. And David said to him, "From what place do you come?" And he said to him, "From out of the camp of Israel, I've come through safe." And David said to him, "Well, what word is this? What's going on? Report to me." And he said, "Well, the people have fled from out of the battle, and many have fallen from out of the people and died. And Saul and Jonathan, his son, died." And David said, now the man was probably thinking this is good news to David, because David is going to be king now. And David said to the servant lad, so he's a young man, "Well, in the reporting it, how do you know that Saul and David, his son, have died?" There's the alpha and the gamma with reporting. We have angel, angelos, messenger, reporting here. And the servant lad said, "Well, upon Gilon, reporting to him, to David, well, by chance I happened to fell among the mountain of Gilboa, and behold, Saul was stayed upon his spear. And behold, the chariots and the commanders of the cavalry joined together against him on the other side. Armaments, chariots. And he looked behind him, and he beheld me, and he called me, and he said, behold," and I said, "Behold, it's I." And he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm an Amalekite. And he said to me, "Well, stand indeed above me and put me to death, for an awful darkness constrained me, for my life is yet in me." He was wounded very bad. He knew he was going to die. And so I stood over him and put him to death, for I knew that he would not live long after he fell. Put him out of his misery. And I took the crown, the Vasilion, that was upon his kephalis, and the armlet upon his arm, and I brought them to my master here. Kyrio, master, it's a title. I get letters from people that get into the usage of the Tetragrammaton in the Old Testament as a name, and it's really the title because it was translated in many places as a Lord Master, not a name. As far as in the Greek, a word for a name and a title are synonymous. You would have to check it out by the context. Jesus Christ, Christos is a title, the Anointed One. David was a Christos. Samuel was a Christos, the Anointed. We'll find out about that here. It wasn't his last name. His name wasn't Jesus Christ. He was Jesus the Christ. And continues, and David took hold of his clothes and tore them when he heard this bad news. His friend had died. And all the men with him. And they beat their chests and wept and fasted until evening over Saul and over Jonathan, his son, these mighty warriors, and over the people of Judah and over the house of Israel, because they were struck by the broadsword. So, even though Saul was against David, they still were of the same people. And David was sad that Saul and Jonathan had died. It wasn't like they were another enemy, another people. They were the same Israelites. And David said to the servant lad reporting to him, "Well, from what place are you?" And he said, "Well, I am the son of a man, sojourner of an Amalekite." And David said to him, "How is it you fear not to bear your hand to utterly destroy the Anointed One?" And here we have the Christon, the Anointed One. We have the Christos is in the nominative when it's a subject. This is the object here. Destroy the Anointed One. That would have been Saul of the Lord. And David called one of his servant lads and said, Come forward, you meet him." And that meant to kill him. And he struck him, and he died. And David said to him, of course before, "Your blood be upon your head, for your mouth," stomatic is a mouth, "answered against you, saying, I put to death the Christon of Kyriou, of the Lord." And David lamented this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. And he spoke to teach the sons of Judah. Now we're going to go into a more of a poem or a song, a lament, a threnon, a lamentation over Saul and Jonathan. To me, this is one of the poetic pieces in the Bible. The reason I say that is because it has a special meaning to me. To maybe you or anybody else, it's just another part of the Bible. But when I was a young man, I was going to Mount Calvary Lutheran Church in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm no longer a denominationalist, but then I went through sixth grades in Mount Calvary, and then I went to St. Jacobi Lutheran School in Jennings, Missouri. Then I went to Lutheran High School Central in St. Louis, which is interesting as things are going on right now in St. Louis, very close to the high school that I went to. I know all about it. There was a protest going down Kings Highway, and it went by Portland Place and Westmoreland Place, which were all these big, huge mansions where all the rich people in St. Louis built in the late 1800s. And this was a couple of blocks from the school that I went to, Lutheran High School. used to go and look at all these buildings, and wow, it was really amazing. But it's in the news because of all these people were protesting, and they were going down right by Portland Place, and there's a mansion on the edge right on Kings Highway, and apparently some protesters they said that they threatened the people in the building, and they had guns, and it became a big brouhaha. It's going on right now. But I just mentioning that because that was where I went to Lutheran High School. Then I went to Lutheran University, Valparaiso University in Indiana. Now, going back to my original reason mentioning this, is the first school, Mount Calvary Lutheran School. The teacher had us memorize different things, and when he got to this place here, he apparently really loved it, and he wanted us all to memorize this beautiful lament. And so it was one of the first things, long things that I memorized in the Bible. A lot of passages, but not a long piece as this is. And so when I memorized it, I don't know, somehow it took hold of me, and I was thinking, this is really beautiful, like the teachers said. And so I always put it on a high pedestal. Other people say it's no different than anything else, which may be. But here it is. It goes, "Behold, it is written upon the scroll of the upright." Now, what he's talking about here, a scroll of the upright, the book of life, possibly. And he said, "Set up a stone monument, O Israel, for the ones having died upon your heights, being slain." Set up a stone monument. We can remember these people that have died, the military of Israel. You can add this trauma, to your English derivatives book. "How the mighty ones are fallen." Oh, you should not announce it in Gath, that is where the Philistines were, and you should not announce it as good news in the streets of Ashkelon, which they will, lest at any time the daughters of the Philistines should be glad, lest at any time the daughters of the uncircumcised should exult. O mountains in Gilboa, may there not fall upon you neither dew nor rain, Hiatol, and O fields of first fruits, for there the shield of the mighty ones was loathed. Death took over. The shield of Saul was not anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain and from the fat of the mighty ones, the bow of Jonathan did not return empty to the rear. He fought. It didn't give up. He was in the midst of the battle. And the broadsword of Saul did not return empty. Fought also. They both did. Saul and Jonathan, the ones being loved, the agapimeni. Jesus was called the agapimenos, the one being loved. This is a plural. And beautiful ones. They were not parted in their life, father and son. And in their death, they were not parted. They died together. They're nimble above eagles and strong above leontas, lions. Daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, the one dressing you with scarlet apparel, with your ornament, cosmetic, comes from that. He ruled Israel and the people and did things, maybe they weren't right, but yet the beneficiaries were the people of Israel. He was the one bearing a golden ornament for your clothes to the women. Oh, how the mighty ones fell in the midst of battle. Oh, Jonathan, upon your heights you were slain. I ache over you, Jonathan. Oh, my brother, you were beautiful to me exceedingly. I was almost crying. Your affection to me caused wonder, above the affection of women. And this is where people would say it was some kind of a homosexual relationship, and it's not, because they wouldn't have done that. They knew the right things of what God wants. Oh, how the mighty ones fell, and the weapons of warfare perished. War takes out so many good ones. I had a half-brother, my mother's other son. She had him when she was 18 and had me when she was 44. And he fell in the Battle of the Bulge. He was actually awarded the Silver Star, which is a couple below the Medal of Honor, stopping a Nazi attack out of a Fort Plappeville by the city of Metz, which is on the border of France and Germany. He's buried in the American Cemetery in Lorraine, France. Oh, how the mighty ones fell. You may have ones that have fallen, and some people are still alive like me. They're in their 80s, and you'll maybe have an uncle or somebody that fell in the Second World War, maybe the Korean War, and many for sure with the Vietnamese War and other wars. These are people in the United States. Now, you can be a person that was alive and the enemy of the United States, but yet you have somebody that fell. And so the people that fought and died, oh, how the mighty ones fell and the weapons of warfare perished. A lot of courage to go and fight. And so in the closing, I just wanted to show you something that Mount Calvary, and that this was the lament that the teacher had us memorize. And here's something I made in 1955. Actually, this was in St. Jacobi Lutheran Church, and I just thought I could show it to you. I don't know if you can see it. Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. And this was in July the 14th, and this is the 16th of 1955. I made that little plaster of Paris plaque, still have it today. We continue now, David on his own, and he goes to Hebron, which is still around. Ziklag, nobody knows where it was, but today opened up the news and Jerusalem Post, J-Post online, and it said that they're pretty sure they found the location of Ziklag, and it was basically just a tell, a hill, a mound where it's a small village, but Hebron is still around. More of it's in the west, was called the West Bank, mainly where the Palestinians, the Palestinians are located in Hebron. So we'll find out now what happens to David in chapter 2. I hope you'll continue with us. And till then, God bless.